And the other piece I think that's really critical is these kids with this complex trauma, just like the adults, they have littler parts inside. They may be 5, but they may have a 2-year-old part that is traumatized, that they carry those old hurt feelings.
Going Inside is a podcast on a mission to help people heal from trauma and reconnect with their authentic self. Join me, trauma therapist John Clarke, for guest interviews, real-life therapy sessions, and soothing guided meditations. Whether you're navigating your own trauma, helping others heal from trauma, or simply yearning for a deeper understanding of yourself, Going Inside is your companion on the path to healing and self-discovery. Download free guided meditations and apply to work with me one-on-one at johnclarketherapy.com. Thanks for being here. Let's dive in. Debra Wesselmann has been an EMDR therapist for 30 years and is now a trainer with the EMDR Institute of Francine Shapiro. She conducts research and has authored and co-authored numerous articles, chapters, and books, including 2 chapters she co-authored with Francine. In the newly released book, EMDR and Family Therapy, Integrative Treatment for Attachment Trauma in Children. Ms. Wesselmann presents keynotes and workshops for organizations both nationally and internationally. Debra, thanks for being here. What else should people know about who you are and how you got here?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Oh gosh, how did I get here? I started my career as an elementary school teacher, and I was teaching in a part of our community that really low socioeconomic area, and had a lot of there was a lot of drug addiction problems in that area, and the kids that was teaching were traumatized, and I realized that what I really wanted to do was help them with their trauma instead of trying to teach them when they were not really interested. And that led me to go back and get my master's degree and really kind of zero in on trauma. And then also my husband and I started our family. This is way back. We're talking a long time ago. So in the early 80s, then we also started a family, and we brought our middle child home from Korea, and she had, a difficult history, and that also made me think a lot about trauma. When I graduated in 89, and I started working for a psychiatrist who worked with a lot of complex trauma patients. We didn't really use that term back then, but that is definitely what they were. And so I got interested early on in hypnotherapy
Mhm.
and thought that might be the way to go. And I actually got certified in hypnotherapy through the American Society of Clinical Hypnosis. But I was at a hypnotherapy conference, and people were all abuzz about this EMDR. And this was like in 94. And at first, I was like, oh, that sounds ridiculous. And then the more I heard about it, the more intrigued I became. And so I got my first training in Denver with Francine Shapiro. I was lucky that she was still training then. And Gerald Puck, I think, did the part 2. I think Francine was part 1. And it blew my mind. And when I came back to Omaha and started using it, the people I was the first in the community to use it, and the psychiatrists that I was working with were all like, What is that nonsense?" But as they started seeing changes in their patients, they were calling me, "Can you see this patient? Can you see that?" They were having me in those days, we had privileges in the hospitals. We don't really do that anymore, but they would have me come into the hospital and work with people. But I was always interested in kids too because of my history as a teacher and my own family, and so then I was like, there was not that much out there on working with kids, and I was interested in this area of attachment. So I was trying to early on figure out, how do I work with these kids who were coming in, and you know their attitude was, I'm not gonna go there with you. I don't wanna talk about that stuff. So it was an interesting challenge, and from that, those early days and kind of all of the the work around that, I really began developing some specific strategies. And I early on, I worked with, Kathy Schweitzer and Stephanie Armstrong. We together, uh, the 2 of us and a couple of other people started the Attachment and Trauma Center of Nebraska, and they helped me really, fine-tune this model, and, so from that came our first book, and then I've done some more fine-tuning since then, and learning more about, like, fetal alcohol effects and
Yeah.
neurodivergence and more about dissociation and how that all comes into play. So, I had more I wanted to say and show people. So, from that came the second book. Kathy and Stephanie are off doing work creating centers, more centers with focused on this model, and so they weren't ever crazy about the writing aspect of things, so they said, "You just go do that, Deb."
Yeah. I want to introduce you to our sponsor for today's episode, Jane, a clinic management software and EMR that helps you handle your clinic's daily admin tasks so that you can free up your evenings and weekends. The Jane team understands how precious your time is and recognizes that charting can often be the most time consuming part of your practice. That's why they're here to help. To save you from having to start your chart notes from scratch, you can check out Jane's template library, which gives you access to templates that have been generously created and shared by health and wellness practitioners in the community. Once you have a template you like, you can choose to customize it further with charting tools such as range scales, text fields, check boxes, and more. To see how Jane can help you spend more time doing what you love, head to the link in the show notes to book a personalized demo. Or if you're ready to get started, you can use the code JOHN at the time of sign up for a 1 month grace period applied to your account. So it sounds like you all make a good team in that regard. It's kind of like, you know,
Yeah,
the right combination of people for a class project. You want someone who can like put pen to paper and get it in on time. And
right. I
I
was
was
that
always like
kid in
the
school.
yeah. I was like the comedic relief, like the. So I probably would have been on your team, yeah, for better or worse. Well, you know, it's interesting because in my view, like therapists and like consumers, like the zeitgeist around trauma is in a really interesting place right now and kind of exploding, both in terms of therapists waking up to this idea of actually treating trauma and not just having clients talk about it and put themselves back in it and going, this sounds really tough. See you next week, which is how a lot of trauma gets talked about in the room, right? Well intending. That's kind of how I started out. And even what brought me to EMDR in 2015 was, gosh, I wish I had something to do with all this stuff that's coming up. But I'm so curious for you, like having done EMDR for decades, what's it been like to see it transform? And even what do you wish you had known back then when you were
Yeah.
getting started with it all and then considering everything you know now?
I do wish I had known everything now
Of
back
course,
then.
of course. If you
We
just
all do.
bottle it and send it,
Yeah, we all do.
Yeah,
But I feel really grateful to have sort of been part of the whole journey of EMDR and grateful
it's
that
like a revolution. Yeah,
yeah, it was like being part of a revolution, it really
yeah,
was, and, I got to know Francine, and that was such an honor. She was so amazing, and, writing the chapters with her, I learned so much. So that was amazing, but going back to your question about what do I wish I had known, well, like, I can give you an example of early on after I got my training, a mom brought her daughter in who had been headbanging at night, and she was a biological daughter, um, but clearly there was a conflictual relationship, and thinking back on it, oh my goodness, it was probably a terribly disorganized attachment. Mom probably had all kinds of trauma of her own. And so, I just had the mom leave and I was going to work with the daughter. And I don't remember what our target was. If it was I just don't remember anymore.
yeah,
But what I remember is having her do the eye movements and having her say, I'm getting nothing. No, no, nothing. well, of course she wasn't getting anything. Of course her defenses were protecting her for good reason. She didn't have a secure holding environment to protect her and support her. And, I was totally jumping into that
Mhm.
before I before anything was prepared. And I remember it was one of those situations where, okay, we have back in the day, we had a lot of insurance companies where it was like, okay, you got 6 sessions,
Yeah.
get her done,
Wrap it up.
wrap it up. And I
Mhm.
just remember I did not get very far with that kiddo. And
Yeah.
I look back on, cases like that and feel sad that I didn't have more, know more
Yeah.
at that point in time. Yeah.
That brings up an interesting point, and I do wanna ask you more about what I think you're already alluding to, which is essentially your model and the model that you all are writing about in your new book, or have written about in your new book. But this idea of, like, how fast or slow to go in therapy, how much to push or encourage or challenge clients to get into that kind of optimal zone of arousal without taking them out the other end, right? Or
Mhm.
without therapy being so uh, boring that they're disengaged, right? And in my experience, especially with EMDR, sometimes we don't exactly know where that threshold is until we kind of bump up against it, right? And go,
Yeah.
okay, that
Yeah.
was too much, right? Or for the client to go, oh, that
Mhm.
that was too much for my system, or I'm feeling really spacey now, or whatever. And the therapist
Mhm.
is going, oh, we've only got 7 minutes left, whatever
Yeah.
it is. So like that dance
Yeah.
and finding that optimal zone is to me a big part of like the art of using the
Mm.
EMDR protocol or just, doing trauma work and reprocessing work in general. Uh,
Yeah, I was talking to a consultee just yesterday, and I used those words pretty much. I said, we were talking about how fast to go and when with a certain complex client that she was working with, and I said, this is where it's both an art and a science. This is where, um, we want to it's like, Marsha Linehan in the DBT world always says, that you wanna balance acceptance with the push for change,
yeah,
and that I feel like we're always kind of navigating that balance, and where there's not a readiness, finding out, what can we do to bring more readiness to this situation? And I work with adults too and attachment issues, but with kids, I think it's so much about the environment and involving those parents because we can't expect kids to be self-regulators. They're they're not old enough. They're not even teenagers. They need that co-regulation. And if the attachment is disorganized or insecure, then that co-regulation is, it's really not happening well at all. So much of it to me is about, that's why, like in the book, we talk about the 3 stages where with kids, actually now stage 1 is the parent work, and I do at least 2 to 6 sessions with parents without the kids in the room when it's this kind of attachment trauma, complex
yeah,
trauma situation. Um,
yeah.
to start with them, and sometimes it's about, if I have some one-on-one time with them and I can, develop some trust and rapport, sometimes I can move them into doing their own work, maybe with one of my
Uh-huh.
partners, which can do so much too, to make them ready and able to attune to their child.
Right,
Because if
right.
they've got all these defenses and they're all about survival, they're in survival mode all the time, then they're not their brain is not attuning to this child of theirs, and that survival brain, it's just not good for parenting. It doesn't
Yeah.
help. Yeah, so
And
that's the
yet
that
it's a
first.
it's a really common state that we find ourselves in as parents is just surviving. I was thinking about that this morning. I've got a 5-year-old and another one on the way any day now, and
Oh,
y-
congratulations.
yeah, thank you. And some mornings are always tough for me. I'm not a morning person, and if you have kids, you gotta be a morning person all of a sudden, whether you like it or not, and there's just so much to get done in the chaos of the morning, and my wife's already gone to work, by the time I've gotten up, she's out the door super early, and then it's
It's
me
all on
doing
you.
breakfast, lunch, getting myself ready somehow, right? Um, thinking about work, right? Like thinking about this interview and whatnot. And sometimes we are in that survival mode of like just barely getting by. And then if my kid becomes dysregulated, right, and I'm already dysregulated, you know, for reasons that have really nothing to do with her, then that's I'm not in a good place to be resonant in resonance with her, and I'm not as good of a parent, and that also triggers my parts that hold shame around that, around like,
Yeah.
okay, I was like short with her or whatever, or impatient, right? And then a part of me is like, "Thanks, you're not doing well, you're screwing up." So I was going to ask you, like, in this first stage with parents, how do you strike a balance between challenging them, but also not activating their protector parts so much that they shut down or feel like bad parents? Because in my experience as a clinician and as a parent, the worst news we could ever hear is like, you're a bad parent, or you're screwing up, or you're screwing your kid up in some way, right? And yet we do have to see that when parents bring in kids to therapy, like, the parents have to be part of the solution because they're also part of the problem.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I think it's so much about attuning to the parents and attuning to, like you're talking about, the stress in their lives, and I can speak to them as a parent, not that you'd have to be a parent, but, speaking to them with that, to being real,
Yeah, helps.
and not, like, all up here,
Yeah,
like, I'm this expert, and here's what you need to do, or you're a bad parent, but speaking to them and being real, and that I wasn't a perfect parent, and boy, I wish I could go back in time and redo some things, what knowing that I would get dysregulated when I was stressed, and so that helps parents feel like they're not being judged, and, that mentalizing state that really helps us connect and attune with people is really a state where we do let go of judgments, and we're real, and we are not black and white, and we're not experts, and I tell people it's not a black and white thing, like good parent or you're a bad parent. We all have our shining moments, and we all have our moments that we'd rather no one even know about, that moment where I lost my cool or whatever. And I just tell them, here's the thing, when you have a child who has experienced trauma, whether it's trauma before they came to you or trauma within your own home, maybe
mhm,
parents who, are now in recovery from alcoholism or drug addiction or something like that. But if your child has been through trauma or medical trauma, it sort of means we have to help you develop some superpowers. And so it's like you don't get to just be, a regular old parent. You have to develop these superpowers.
yeah,
And I feel your pain. I know that when your child is dysregulated and triggered, it is it's like beyond what most parents ever have to expect to do. Because, we have parents that come in and their kids are having meltdowns that last 3 hours,
mm,
and, they're maybe they're stealing, and or maybe they're sexually acting out and all that sort of thing. So it's a lot for any parent, and then especially if they carry their own trauma. So I really attune to that. And, I tell them the best gift you could give yourself and your child is to just do some of your own work on your nervous system through probably
yeah,
some trauma work and other work that you could do, and that is going to make such a huge difference in terms of
yeah,
your kids and your child's willingness. your child's willingness to open up and do these hard things of feeling feelings and talking about traumas.
Well, but, parenting is a daily exposure to your own unfinished business, your own work that's yet to be done, right? And, when we step back and go, "Why is it such a problem for me that my kid is having big feelings right now?"
Ah,
Is it really a problem that it's happening in the grocery store? And I'm going, "Oh my gosh, all these people are noticing," right? Something about this, like, there's a part of me that goes, "I need to shut this down," right? Or I need to get my kid to, like, wipe away the tears or whatever. And it's really our stuff, right? Like, is it really a problem that my kid's having big feelings right now? You know? Why is it that there's a part of me that wants to kind of, like, rush them along, right? Or, like, get
mhm,
them to calm down, right? Which
mhm.
also, as a kid or an adult, that doesn't feel good when
No.
someone is trying to change you in that way, right? In other words, saying feeling this way or feeling it outwardly is not acceptable. Like we need to move on.
And we all know how well it works when you say, "Calm down."
Calm down. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
I've tried that one before, in a conversation with my wife. It didn't go very well. She's probably also used it on me. Didn't go very well either, right? Because also what that communicates is, like, you're being ridiculous,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Or
It
irrational, and again, that's how kids hear it too, is like, you're being unacceptable,
yeah, it's the
you you know,
opposite of attunement.
or better yet, like, you're being unlovable, and then
Yes.
kids and adults alike, we experience this loss of connection, right? That, oh my gosh, and that reminds me of, like, the greatest loss of connection in my life or the big T trauma or the
Mhm.
whatever it is, right? So, has many ripples. Yeah,
And it moves me then into more dysregulation, more feelings
yeah,
of despair or overwhelm, and yeah,
yeah,
but it's a common interaction
yeah,
between 2 individuals of, you know, whether they're both, adults or you have an adult and a child.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
the irony is a lot of times when we can just slow down and attune to our kids and resonate with these big feelings and let them have them, then paradoxically, they tend to move through them quicker
Yeah,
and more smoothly when we do that. But there's also this fear among parents of, like, I'm going to kind of, like, reinforce it, quote unquote, if I, like, validate the feeling or validate the big anger, which might be different than, like, you can validate the anger and also comment on the behavior piece, which is like throwing stuff at your brother or whatever.
yeah, we in the parent accompanying parent book, we have a whole thing on meltdowns. We have and my colleague Ann Potter really helped me develop this. The 3 stages of a meltdown. And the first stage of these are the big meltdowns, not the tantrums, like, "Oh, I want some candy, you gotta give it to me."
Mhm.
But the real, the meltdowns, and we see the first stage is like a panic attack. It's, they are so frightened deep down
Right, right,
inside. And the control is not there. And if you move too close, they get more dysregulated, they get threatened, and if you move too far away, they feel threatened because you're rejecting them
right,
or abandoning them.
right,
So you have to find, like, the sweet spot where you can kinda hang out and be like, "I'm here, I'm
yeah.
right here,
Which is
you're
so confusing
okay."
because the kid might also be going, "I hate you, get away from me," but they're
Mhm.
also looking at you like, "But, oh dear God, also don't leave the room. Don't go too far."
Exactly.
And then the parents eventually go, "I don't know what you want from me." Right? Fine, just figure it out or just be alone, shut your door until you figure it out, you know?
Yeah, and of course that taps into things that parents carry in
Yeah,
terms of rejection and hurt and, well, okay then. I'll
yeah,
just I'll
fine.
just leave fine.
Figure it out yourself, right? Because the parents are feeling that as like, I'm no longer useful, right? Or I'm being kind of useless by my kid, right? They're having these huge feelings and rejecting my help or whatever, you know?
On the second stage, you can start to move closer and be, reassuring and a little more connecting. And then in the third stage, that's usually they've come through it and now they're in shame. And oftentimes they're sobbing or they're just so ashamed or they're hiding. And that's where they really need the embrace and just, it's okay. We'll figure this out and we'll take this into therapy. I always tell them, just, you don't have to figure it all out. You can
Yeah.
just reassure them. We can in therapy, we can figure out what was the trigger and we can work on, how
Yeah.
they can manage it and so
Yeah.
on.
Well, kids and adults alike, when we're dysregulated, we're no longer learning, right? Like, you're not gonna have a teaching moment, you know, about the candy or the hitting when your kid's completely dysregulated, right? And I see a lot of
Oh,
parents trying to, like, also make it a teaching moment, and it's like, I get that, and there's a time and place. Again, and for my parent clients, it's like, as an adult or when you're talking to your boss at work and you're getting some difficult feedback and getting super dysregulated, right? Just like white
mhm.
knuckling that conversation. It's like your brain is no longer in a state where it can learn, right? Or creative and compassionate and all these things that we need as parents, right? Um, so but really kind of choose your moments as a parent every
That's
day.
That
Yeah.
is so true. That is such a good point. Yeah. And we're often parents often, the natural thing, yeah, is you need to do this, and next time
Yeah.
you remember how it's dysregulated and it's just nothing is integrating.
Right.
Yeah,
Nothing's getting
yeah,
in. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, we started this conversation talking about that, readiness and how fast to move kids, or adults, and definitely when it comes to kids, the environment is really that first piece to work with the parents and getting them
Mm-hmm.
on board, and then the beauty of it is you can bring them into the sessions, even into those readiness sessions. We have a lot of activities we do with kids and parents to help them, and we tell parents, "You are gonna learn along with your child." You in this way, you and your child also have a language you can share that you can speak at home, as they learn about belly breaths and the cooked noodle exercise where we relax our bodies like a cooked noodle, different things that they can do even together at home. And this is building trust, building connection, building that shared language and that sense of collaboration. And then we have our EMDR resource methods that we've developed where we create experiences of closeness and connection in the session through, we call it like the messages of love exercise, where we prompt the parent with some questions to bring out these loving messages and loving memories and that sort of thing, and create this feeling of closeness and connection. And then we add the slow BLS to deepen that good feeling. We're building good feelings initially. And the other piece I think that's really critical is these kids with this complex trauma, just like the adults, they have littler parts inside. They may be 5, but they may have a 2-year-old part that is traumatized, that they carry those old hurt feelings. And so we are often talking with kiddos about the littler part of them on the inside or inside their hearts, but the beauty of it with kids is they still have parents. So it's not too late to meet the unmet needs of the littler parts inside of the child. Not only the 10-year-old sitting in your office or the 13-year-old, but the 2-year-old and the 5-year-old parts on the inside. So we do a lot of, and kids have imagination. So we do a lot of, imagination exercises where the parents go into safe, nurturing warm spaces with the littler ones on the inside and care for them and talk about what they're going to do for them. And then we add this slow BLS again to deepen and help them integrate that that positive affect. And we can do a lot of healing sort of preliminary work that
Yeah.
helps move that child into a space where they can then reprocess their traumatic memories with little parts sort of tucked in and feeling safe and using their big kid brain, which allows access to the adaptive information that
Hmm.
they care that we've provided and the adaptive information that they know. And so the processing then goes so much easier. And it's easier to recall and think and talk about your past trauma when you're feeling surrounded by
Mhm.
connection and support, and you feel a sense that those littler parts are safe on the inside and cared for and nurtured. Now it's a safer time to venture into some of those more difficult memories. So it's all about doing the preliminary work,
Mm.
creating the right environment and the timing. And that makes a huge difference. But like you say, there's still this sort of balance that we're always trying to manage. Are we going too slow or are we going too fast?
Yeah. Well, that's also
And
like the art of, again, you implementing or using a protocol. And so at my group practice that I own, it's a training practice, and everyone is trained in EMDR or gets trained through us, and they are developing as trauma therapists, during their residency with us for a couple years. And a lot of times when trying to start using EMDR, they kind of forget that they're also a therapist. They forget that they're a practitioner. There's a person in the room that also needs attunement and resonance, and sometimes you're missing cues because you're looking down at the protocol or worrying about
Mhm.
skipping a step or whatever it is. So I often really encourage them to uh, also remember to be in the moment with their client, even though, yes, they're also doing this protocol, but there's a part of them that's afraid to like skip a step or whatever it is, right? And sometimes
Yeah,
that can uh, make that can be counterproductive for the work.
that's hard, isn't it? Especially when EMDR is still new
Yeah.
because it's sort of taking all of your focus, all of your energy is going into just remembering the protocol. What are the steps and
Yeah.
what is the script? And yeah, I think it's hard for folks to bring their actual therapist presence into the room
Mhm.
and be who they really are and do the things they know already and instinctively as a therapist. Yeah. It's hard what we do, John.
It is
It's
hard.
not easy.
It's not easy. There's a lot of ambiguity, right? And
Yeah.
but we also are desperate for things that kind of reduce the ambiguity. So again, whether it's like a protocol or like DBT of like we go through these modules,
Mhm.
right? And I think some therapists lean on that too much as a way to kind of escape the ambiguity and the uncertainty of like what we do. But that's also very human to want to try to reduce therapy into something that's, more understandable for us and for the client, right?
Yeah.
You
Right.
know,
Right.
we wanna
Right.
know what we're doing, and again, like,
Yeah.
especially for therapists and our own histories, and with a core piece of trauma being loss of agency, loss of control, feeling out of control, like, we don't wanna feel out of control in the therapy room, certainly not.
No,
Or feel
certainly not.
uncertain as to, like, where this is going or is this helping? Or, "Oh my gosh, my client or this kid is getting worse as treatment progresses," right?
Well, we do have those feelings because we are human, right? We
Yeah,
and we don't want to, but I think
yeah,
I think the key is being attuned to what we are feeling so that we're managing those feelings that we're having at the same
yeah,
time that we're attuning to what's going on inside the client. Because if we only attune one way or the other, we're gonna lose the connection.
that's
Yeah,
right, yeah.
yeah.
Well, I think something that sounds like it really works for your model is you have a process that you walk people through, and that builds a
Mm.
lot of trust. That is in itself a container, right? Of like that we're in this stage one piece of working with the parents and doing this resourcing stuff and showing them like this is where we're at in the process, right? It's like
Yes.
we need that for anything. It's like I bought a car recently, and like the guy was like really good at showing me where I was in that process because it's like not something I do every day. And it really stinks to feel uncertain or new at something or like, hey, are we like at the end of this process or the beginning or what happens next? Right. And so that's a big piece of building this container, even though there is also lots of, fluidity and ambiguity inside of the stages, right?
Right. I think you're very right. I think that we all do better when we sort of have a path and we see what's coming up. We have at least a sense of it. I think that's very true. It is a sort of container. I hadn't thought of it that way, but that's
Mhm.
right. Yeah.
So that being said, and yeah, we got maybe 10 more minutes left. What else is included in your model, and what else is in the book
Mhm.
that helps to set all of this up and help clinicians use it?
Yeah. So the stage 2 involves those family therapy and EMDR activities that build trust and connection and, take care of the little parts and all that. Stage 3 is where we move in a very gentle way into the trauma material, um, the triggers and the traumas. And what one of the things we often do is target and reprocess some triggers early on because the child is getting a sense of how the reprocessing works with something that's a little easier. And we might contain it a bit so that they're not just, associating to traumas during the session, a lot of traumas that maybe one, and we may use an interweave, like, "And how is it different today?" Bring it back to the trigger, do future templates. The thing about kids too is you can and especially kids with some neurodivergence or fetal alcohol exposures, we can do a lot of role plays. We can use sand tray or puppets, whether we're working with traumas or triggers or future templates. And they love that stuff that engages them and feels fun and playful for them. But then as we move into the trauma piece, we like to begin with a timeline and a therapeutic story. And Joan Lovett, love her stuff. She helped us early on develop a little outline specifically for kids who, came from hard places. And we write this little therapeutic story. Well, we start with a timeline, just first putting on the timeline things that were positive in their lives or where they lived when, kind of neutral, and maybe some positive events. And what were the good things you learned when you went on that vacation or you moved in with grandma? And then put in, some of the what are some of the hard things? And then we just briefly add those to the timeline. Of course, we've already done history taking with the parents, but they don't really know everything. The child has a whole world of stuff in their brains that they've never shared. And it comes out, I find that it just comes out piece by piece gradually. So we start with a very simple timeline, and they usually will add some things there. And then we start writing a story a la Joan's outline. And it starts with grounding them in the present, and then we talk about the first hard thing. Oh, the first good thing. Usually we say, this is Joan's little sentence she inserted. Like all kids, this little child had some good things in their life and had some hard things. So we start with a good thing. And one good thing is always just that they were born. They were born lovable and open to learning and curious and a good heart, and then maybe the hard thing, and we just touch on it. Like a hard thing was, oh, their mom had a problem with these bad kinds of drugs that made her brain foggy, and she didn't know how to take care of her baby. And then we put in what the little child may have believed at the time, like that little baby may have thought, maybe I can't trust anyone, and maybe I'm not lovable enough. And then we put in what we all would want that baby to know. We all would want that baby to know the truth is that baby was lovable and special, and the mom was doing the best they could. Um, Although this was a sad thing, and then we move into maybe something good, like somebody stepped in who saw that hard things were happening, and so then we talk about the good thing and how they were cared for in a good way, and we make it short. It's just a short little story. It's just a beginning, but it's a first sort of venturing into that really hard story. I mean, we got kids with such hard stories. Parents
Mhm.
who've, been in prison or murdered somebody or, just all kinds of stuff. So they need to they need an adult to make sense of it for them first. We cannot
Yeah.
expect them to just go process that when they have no adaptive information in their brain to make sense of it. So the story makes sense of it. And we read it through with the fast BLS, and then we go back and just target individual events and
Mhm.
know they've got some, language that makes sense, and the processing goes so much better because also they have this support. The parents are right there. Even if it's the parent who had the addiction and they've reunified, I have found that to be an amazing opportunity for that parent to make repairs. And, as an interweave to say, "Mom, if you could go back in time, what would you do?" And oh, they love being able to talk about what they would do if they'd been sober and how they're so sorry for what happened. It's a very healing thing for parents and kids. If they're adoptive parents, they can talk about what they would do if they would be able to fly back in time and be there with that little baby and, what they would do then. So there's all kinds of healing opportunities through little interweaves when you have parents in the room.
Mhm.
Yeah.
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 In our practice, some of us see kids and teens, although mostly adults. And a lot of times in working with adults, I'm working with folks who have that story piece, having been locked in for decades.
Yeah.
It's like really rooted in there, right? Like it feels like truth. For instance,
Mhm.
like that I was, sexually abused and it was my fault, when I was
Mhm.
7, and it's decades later, right?
Lived
But
with
there's
that your whole life.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah. It feels like that must be the truth because the familiarity is so great, right? And it's locked in, at least for now. And one thing that EMDR is really good at is um, helping to uproot some of that piece, right? That cognition, that core belief piece that is often attached to the trauma. Like, what does this mean, or what do I fear this means about me? This thing that happened to me, right? And usually, it's right there. Like, that cognition is readily
It's
available and
right
ready to be
there.
worked with.
And one of the things that I love about working with kids is now, they don't have to live with that for decades. They don't
Exactly.
have to, it won't shape their life. That belief that there was something wrong with me and I'm
Yeah.
not lovable.
Right.
They have an opportunity for a new future
Yeah.
when we can intervene early.
That was the point I was trying to make, but I forgot to bring it home.
You
So
forgot the
thank you
point.
for bringing it home. Yeah, like
But
working
what
with
you
that
said is so
closer to the
true.
time of injury. Yeah.
Yeah, what you said is so true, though, that thank goodness we have EMDR
Yeah.
because that can unlock those old beliefs that have been set in stone forever.
Exactly. Yeah. Deborah, this has been uh yeah, really great to hear about your work and how you got here, and of course the book. So congrats on the new book. This episode will be released a few weeks from now, which will then be, I think, a few weeks from the release date of the book. So that being said, how can people find out more about the book and how can they get their hands on it?
Yeah. Well, it's of course, all books are on Amazon and W. Norton is the publisher. Um, uh, they can learn more also on my website, which is debrawesselmann.com. So that's a good place to go. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you so much for having me, John. This was a
My
lot of fun.
pleasure. Yeah. Yeah, we'll be sure to put links to that. And I was looking at your website and it looks like you also have lots of different trainings for clinicians that
Yeah.
are offered. Yeah, so there's lots to check out, and it seems like a lot of different ways people can learn from you. That's great. Well, thank you again, Deborah. All the best with your work and with the book, and as you continue to evolve this model. So yeah, thanks again for being here.
Take care, John.
Take care. Thanks for listening to another episode of Going Inside. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe wherever you're listening or watching, and share your favorite episode with a friend. You can follow me on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at John Clarke Therapy and apply to work with me one-on-one at johnclarketherapy.com. See you next time.